So today I will be bringing you into more of the application space for our last talk in the research section, and so this will be on research in AR and VR for health. And so I'll just jump right in and say, like, what are we looking at today in terms of like what are the latest things on the scene and where do they come from? And so some of our ancient history in XR VR for health starts in 1995. And so that's when one of the first academic publications on VR for a health purpose, VR for fear of heights, came out. And then 1996 was Snow World, which is still really prevalent today. And so Snow World is amazing. It takes the perception of burns, and so for victims who've been burned, and then you put a VR headset on and you're in this world of snow. And so every time there's a medical sort of like something happening, like interaction with your burned skin, and you feel really hot and searing, you're in this snow world. And so this actually changes your perception of the sensation from being burning hot pain to being something like a searing cold. And so it's very interesting that VR like changes our very perception of sensation. And so pain management, fear of heights, fear of spiders, fear of other things, today are quite prevalent. And so this is two of the examples where virtual reality is really prevalent in medicine. It's taken about 20, 25 years to get there. And so a 20-year timeline is actually not too unusual. And if we look at other kinds of disciplines, other kinds of interaction techniques, it does take 10 to 20 years to really get out into the main market space. And so some of the things that I find so fascinating about this when VR and AR and XR work for health is why. How is it working? Why is it working? And can we really understand that to build more better effective things? And so recently, after 20 years, after they've seen that this kind of experience works for pain, they're still doing fMRI scans to understand how is the brain perceiving sensation in an immersive environment. So it's really exciting, and part of the research that I'll tell you about today is really looking at how AR and XR changes what's happening in the brain at the moment of interaction. So some of the things that I think I'm sure preaching to the choir here of things that we need when we're doing our VR, AR, XR research. You want to start off with the bright ideas, the super exciting ideas. You want to co-design with people who matter and communities who are going to be using these products. And then part of the work that I do uses experimental design to establish causal relationships between experiences and outcomes. And so if we're seeing reduced or changed sensation and pain, how do we establish that VR is really the cause for that in terms of other variables that could be confounding? And also, lastly, investigating the mechanism. If we see this is working, why is it working? And so the problem space that I'm working in and that we'll be talking about today is a problem that's been around for a really long time, and that's lack of physical activity. And in particular, for older adults who have stroke, physical activity after stroke is something that aids neuroregeneration. And so you lose part of your functional ability due to paralysis, and you can create new brain connections after stroke, and VR and AR can help with that process. Also, other things are involved. The social situation that you find yourself is a factor for who exercises and who doesn't. Social isolation is part of what is a risk factor after stroke. And so what I'll present to you are some new directions with serious games, which is what we call some video games for health, based on a little bit of my background. So I'll introduce myself for a moment here. So I'm kind of a new person on the scene in New Zealand. I've been here for a couple of years, and I'm in the computer science department. Thank you, Pi, for introducing me. I have a computer science and human factors engineering background from the University of Toronto, then brain drain south to Stanford and did a postdoc there and worked a little bit with Google for my postdoc. And then got a job at Yahoo and Tumblr. And so in the last session, we were talking a little bit about user-generated content. And so at Yahoo and Tumblr, that was where I lived, the research that I did. And so this is a screenshot of Yahoo News comments. And so for years, I was looking at who's commenting on Yahoo News, where are these commenters coming from across the globe, like producing like content day after day after day, talking to strangers about their opinions in the news. And it's really fascinating, and it's a really interesting activity. Like if you want to understand how to make users generate content, you have to go to places where they're already doing it and understand the infrastructure and the motivation that's making that happen. And so like one example from my time at Yahoo was if there is a comment with a question mark, that comment is much more likely to get a huge number of replies. And so we're thinking about like what are ways that we can increase engagement. The other platform that I was working on is Tumblr, and so it's a highly visual blogging, social blogging platform. And so the content creators there were making amazing art, uploading it, also participating in communities of art and interests. So I take some of the amazing stuff from those years of like people wanting to contribute to platforms, like spending their time contributing to platforms, creating content, and seeing how that we can use that in other domains of XR and health. So here are two case experiments where I do that. And so the first one is around Makura Studio in our very own Mount Albert. And so this is a studio time for artists who have had a stroke. And so it's weekly studio time. And with my PhD student Marilyn, we brought virtual reality to the art therapy studio and just said like, okay, like let's see what's working for you in creating art in virtual reality. And so we were really getting into the materiality, the movement. Here you can see like the posture. Ended up being very exciting in terms of possibilities for furthering how can we use virtual reality for health. And so one of the things that came up unexpectedly in that research was how the older adults were choosing colors and perceiving colors and using the color tools. And so a couple of the questions that came up at Makura was, is there brown? I would like to draw something brown. Where's sand? Does this color, can I use black? Is black here? And so just thinking about diverse populations and using the creativity tools, and is this tool allowing them to do the art that they want to do? And so we dove into that question and we said, how does your creativity tool, how does your color palette influence the work that you do? And so that was the question that we wanted to ask. So this is an OSCI paper actually that Marilyn is presenting later today because OSCI event is simultaneous to this one. And so in the paper we talk a little bit about how we came to this color palette with 116 colors, but I'll leave that for later and just talk about how I wanted to compare the effect of color picker on the artwork that people created. And so we did a between subject study, which really means you have a control group and an intervention group, and then you compare how they behave. And so we wanted to do this study in a sort of open space. So this was during open day at University of Auckland. We had participants come in, and also during some other workshops. And we had them either use our color palette or a kind of standard HSV color palette to create their artwork, no other priming in any way, and then went on to analyze the artworks that people created. So we were curious about some things like, do they use a different number of colors? Do the types of colors change? Do they make different kinds of artworks? Like, how do they feel about the usability of the tools? And so these are some examples of the kinds of artworks that people created. And so some of the things weren't too different. So the amount of time that people spent painting, pretty much the same. Number of colors used was actually like pretty much the same, 7 versus 6. And in fact, with the discrete color picker having more colors, this is not a statistically significant finding, but it's quite interesting to think you're presented with fewer colors as a choice, and yet you use more in your artwork. Like number of colors used per minute, time spent selecting colors were not too different. Where we did find differences in the kinds of colors that were used. And so some of the things that you'll see just by eyeballing it is that the HSV color picker, the artworks, these are the artworks of all 20 participants in each group, sort of shown together. These ones have a lot more green, and this one has sort of like different kinds of tones of maybe more of the red tones. So then we did do some statistical analysis on the colors and found that it was in fact the case that there was some significant differences in green and in red, skewness. And so all that to say that the stats sort of back us out to say like, yes, color picker does influence the amount or the kinds of colors that people are using. And then in terms of usability, not too many differences there, although there was some sort of non-significant trend, like I found more colors here with the HSV color picker, but we did have a pretty tech-savvy bunch of folks in this study compared to the original study at Mount Studio. And then to put colors in context and like the tools that we're using today in our artworks, this visualization is the colors used in oil paintings in the UK from 1250 to 2010. So influences there being like availability of paint, cost of paint, access, and so you can see how the colors of paintings are changing over time. And so our color picker, which was made with a kind of kind of pencil color set as an inspiration, the colors used there, or the hues, are more similar to what we see in oil paintings compared to HSV. So you can think that the generations of art that are coming out right now will be qualitatively different than the art from the past based on the color tools that we're giving our users. And so that's one example of how tool influences perception and human behavior. And I quickly would like to go through a second case experiment. So this particular project is similar for an older group of people, similar in the sense that it's still like in the painting space. And so what we had are canvases in space that radially repeated any drawings on the cone, and so these created a sort of kaleidoscope or flowers. And you can see that these, I'll just play that one more time, that these like cones are sort of in space, in virtual reality around the user. So coming from that other study, we were thinking like, oh, isn't it interesting how people are using their upper limb to reach when they are painting, and can we leverage that for some rehabilitation exercise? And so this was one study of that. If we can either, if we can use the cones or placement of the canvas in space to elicit some upper limb movement. And so similar kind of research approach. We have a control group and an intervention group. And the thing that we're changing in this particular study is the location of the cone. Either we let the participant choose where it is, like I'll press a button here and I'll draw here, or the cone is placed by the system in space. And you finish one cone and then the next one appears somewhere else and you have to paint in that spot. So that was what we wanted to compare. How does that, just that one feature difference, influence behavior? And so we, again, between subject study, had 30 participants in a similar kind of open university campus. And we were comparing 1 minute, okay, we would be fast. So the big news is that when people choose it for themselves, they tend to choose it closer to their bodies. And so the system can make them reach a little bit more. So in fact, we do see longer reaches away with a system-placed canvas. A little bit of higher enjoyment for the system-placed canvas. And so that's interesting. They seem to enjoy it a little bit more. And the reason is that they feel more in control. So this is one of the interesting conundrums of systems design. Sometimes when you give the user less functionality, they feel more in control. And so this is such an example where we take a little bit of functionality away, a little bit of choice, and they feel a greater sense of control. And so just gonna quickly flip through some exciting future work, partnering with Amber at ADA and working with Audi Model of Health, which is a very holistic model, bringing together mental, spiritual, social, and physical health together in this kind of experience. And so a concept that just happened over tea was thinking about how do we use like a user-generated content, like social media type content for upper limb movement. And so together we came up with this idea, and I had some honor students who created the first prototype iteration of jigsaw puzzles that are floating around the user. This is in augmented reality, and you can select your virtual puzzle piece and put it together. And here's a participant who's putting together a photo of him and his wife 10 or 15 years earlier. So just bringing that, our sort of addiction to social media and social contents into a physical activity. What would it be like if every time you had a notification you had to do like a jumping jack to see what your next email was? Would we all be healthier people? So thank you for your time today. There's have some little industry awards, so good job students. In 2019, they presented their work to judge. This was the kaleidoscope study, and got some industry award. And of course, in 2020, it was all virtual, and they got an award for this virtual puzzle. So congrats, students. It's fantastic to work with them. And so next steps are working on more co-design with the community and field testing. So thank you very much.